Okay, so good afternoon everybody, I hope you enjoyed your lunch. My name is Catherine, I'm the Assistant Course Director for the MSc. I'll be chairing the afternoon session. So I'd first like to introduce Tanya Szendeffy. Tanya's background is in the history of art and Italian, and then she worked in project management before graduating from the MSc in Sustainable Heritage. And she's now Senior Conservation and Design Officer for Islington Council. Tanya?
Thank you very much. Okay, so yes, I've just told you more or less what I've done, so I'll just tell you how I got from the MSc to my job. I changed jobs quite dramatically. After my undergraduate degree, I ended up in project management and then decided I wanted to go back into buildings, so I decided to train. I was living in Italy at the time, came back to London, found this MSc in Sustainable Heritage, luckily, and carried it out part-time. And after that, I took holiday time, thanks, from my job that I was doing at the time, again project management, to do voluntary work like a 19-year-old. But that was fine, and then finally I got a job in London Borough, Borough, Kensington, Chelsea, which was fantastic, and then recently I've moved into Islington, in a London Borough. So I'm just going to tell you what I'm going to talk to you about today. Sustainable urbanism in London, which is about environments that make you feel good. So I'll run through the responsibilities I have in my current job and how they relate to what I'm going to talk about, what I learned during my MSc that contributes to my work. And I'm going to give you an overview of my own opinions. They do concur with lots of other people's, but they are my own, on what does and doesn't contribute to making London a sustainable and livable city. And then I'm going to run through one slide on some research that has been carried out, which will support some of my ideas. So my role and the challenges that I have. So my main role is to work with applicants to determine applications for listed building consent. So looking after listed buildings and making sure that whatever development goes on preserves or enhances the special architectural or historic interest of that building, and also looks after the environment which is often in a conservation area, and why we're trying to preserve or enhance the character of that area. So it's a very conservative way, part of my work. And the other side of my work is to help architects and developers, sometimes private owners, to come up with designs that are harmonious, look good, and will stand the test of time. Now, the course is very timely with its sustainability agenda, because after that everything started with the sustainable agenda. And in the planning role, sustainable development is the core tenet of all of the development that is now going on. Theoretically, as we shall see, there are two issues that are affecting development in London at the moment, and they are quite incredible. So first of all, between 2000 and 2004, the housing density increased fourfold, which is enormous, which means buildings going up. And the other thing is that there have been over 260 towers approved over the last 2 years. Now that is literally, I think, unthinkable in most people's minds. Even people who work in the field can't quite get their heads around it. And this is going to irretrievably change London's skyline. So what did I learn during my MSc that has taken over to my job? Now, there are lots and lots of things, and it's an absolutely fantastic degree, and I know you've heard about lots of elements of it, and it's well worth doing. The first is a practical thing, which is conservation physics. Now, I learned all about how materials work, and how they breathe, and how they don't work, how they age, how they develop. And that actually answered lots of questions I had myself about why I thought natural materials were so good. And it confirms that I think that manufactured materials will never, ever equal natural materials, and that they are the exterior buildings, they are king. And the sustainability mindset, holistic thinking, you can't think of anything just from one point of view, and you're always juggling different priorities and competing priorities, so you have to be quite level-headed about it. What I've learned on the job, specific to my field, developers want money. They want to maximise their profits, and you are there, one little person saying, look, I know your 60-storey tower is quite nice, but we might have to adapt it somehow. Architects, they usually want buildings that are going to look fantastic, stand out, look good in a glossy magazine, and now they're saying, well, actually it has to fit in with this little fine-grained community that you want to build your tower in. So reconciling lots of different priorities is not easy. It is possible, but it's not easy. So national and local planning policies talk about a presumption in favour of sustainable development, but the sustainable is usually economic viability for the developer. And that should change. We need policies to work on that. And most areas, our projects are overdeveloped by 50%. So that gives you an idea of people like me, how much we know about development and how much time we have to judge these applications. So two things: you need fight and tenacity if you want a sustainable solution. So I'm going to go through what I think, as I said, make livable environments. This is not a talk on taste and architectural preferences. We all have different tastes and preferences, and that's fine, but it's what environments make you feel comfortable. So I think the most important thing is that you have buildings at a human scale with good proportions, buildings that engage with the street, and facades that break down bulk. The boring flat facades really do not help you to enjoy an area. So an enlivening facade with textured materials that acquire a pattern of age, and buildings that provide decorative elements. It doesn't have to be putty sticking all over the building, but something that gives the building some kind of enlivens it. Buildings should have a sense of privacy and closure, so you know you're going home. And where possible, it's ideal that you have landscaping. So I'm just going to run through two building typologies. It's not for or against, it's just saying what they're like. So pre-war, this is what a lot of buildings look like. They were human scale. They were usually 2 bays wide. You'd have an entrance on one side, a window on the other side, and they would go up. They would have lovely big windows, and they were slightly offset from the street, and they were comfortable environments to live in. Now this cartoon image in the middle shows you how tall ideally buildings should be in relationship to the street. And these building typologies meet these requirements, which a lot don't. Just here on the right at the bottom, you can see that these streets are easily adapted to shopping streets, which you can have more activity. So these are common features of post-war developments. You can see they're very different. You have very monolithic blocks, square, repetitive geometric patterns, often very small windows, often ill-placed windows, and strangely proportioned windows, especially with relationship to wall-to-window proportions, which you didn't have beforehand. You had much more elegant buildings. These buildings are difficult to navigate. You're not really quite sure where the entrances are, and you don't necessarily have a sense of engagement with the buildings because you don't have a great sense of privacy, and they're often planted either in big parks or quite close to the street, but they don't engage with the street. Just to show you what's been going on recently, these are some new buildings, and again, some people might love some. I think one or two arrived. I just think a whole influx of them will erode what we like about London. And these buildings are getting more sheer-faced, more alienating, more impenetrable, and again, these massive roof-like structures in glass and steel. They are actually out of sci-fi movies, some of them. They're very, very different to the buildings that preceded them. And again here, just to remind you of the proportion of built environment to street, they don't work. And a lot of these buildings are in medieval streets of London, which obviously are very fine and small. So where do people want to live? Now this is not me saying this is where people want to live. This is generally, it's accepted through house prices, through research carried out by estate agents, that people want to live in these kind of buildings. Now, I'm just thinking this one. Yeah. So the person who designed this, most of you will know who he is, lives in this building here. And these buildings, they're still not let out. This is One Hyde Park, and they are extortionately expensive and not very pleasant to be near. That's also taken from Hull. Now this man here, who you've in London lives in this building here. And his favourite place in London, according to a poll recently carried out by the Standard, is this building, these buildings here, Ivory Fields, which are small, fine-grained buildings looking onto a park. Now, this is quite interesting. There was a massive Brownfield site which was to be developed. It's one of the few in London. And there were two options for this site, this proposal and this one. And this man here, who's nice and new country, has approved this one. And this was against all the local councils who were involved, all the local people, the residential area, the community societies. And one of the reasons he approved it, I'm not going to get into politics and start being cynical, is that these buildings can no longer be built because the London plan that this man approved does not allow these buildings to be built. I just thought I'd show you the golden section, which many of you will be familiar with, which is known throughout history to be a comfortable and a harmonious proportion. And these kind of buildings that we've seen before do fit in with that. And they are comfortable to look at. So the 6 most expensive boroughs in London are characterised by, and the most expensive cities in the country are characterised by Georgian and Victorian buildings. So what happens at street level? When you go around, what do you want to see? You want to see life, you want to see people, you want to see fine grain, you want to feel comfortable. Some of these images are taken from a talk which was carried out at Design London recently, which is an organisation that promotes good design, and all the delegates were asked what their favourite places were in London, and apart from the buildings, most of them said little markets. The markets, they came up with all these images of fine grain buildings with little active street frontage. Now, I'm not saying we should harken back to the olden days, but this is not bad design, and these shop fronts lasted for a long time. We have our transoms, our mullions, you know, the whole thing is broken down so that if you sit here, you don't feel overwhelmed. This is what we're getting now. Everything is now going towards glass, and if you have a glass frontage without anything behind it, it can be quite oppressive and harmful and boring. I wasn't going to use subjective language, but that's what came out. And a lot of them are double height, so you feel lost and you feel very small in these spaces. These are award-winning buildings, all of them, apart from this one. And they have these unwelcoming places. You're never quite sure if you're next to a residential building, a commercial building, a bank. You don't really know. They don't tell you a lot. And they're not really very nice to be next to. So this is something that I think is also very important, is enlivening facades with the use of textured and natural materials. I put natural in because I went through a lot of materials and tried to find materials that were not natural, that would achieve a pattern or a beige. And I couldn't find anything. If anyone wants to correct me on that, I'd be happy to hear it. This is a little bit of wall, which was built in 1837, and it's looking pretty good. And just that bit of wall on its own is not boring to look at. You know, you've got something to engage the eye, and when it's put as a backdrop to other buildings, it looks very nice. If you cement rendered all over that, it would look very different. This is Georgian building, so we have lots of subdivision of windows. Again, if you put that into one single window, it would look very different and moved the balconies down. This is faience work, so glazed brick, and I think everything should be built. It helps to create this effect in very small blocks, and then over time, you know, they're quite different age, pattern of age, and quite good. This red brick, again, if it's correctly bonded, will look good for a long time. This is Flemish bond, so the way you build the bricks is set here, stretch ahead, and it's a very nice pattern that it creates here. Stone, which is unusual for residential buildings. In fact, this was refaced, I think, in the 19th century, or no, the 20th century. So it's one of the rare residential places in London with stone facing. But again, it requires a pattern of age due to the texture of the material. If you really don't like brick, you can paint over it, and you will still see the texture below it. This is a building that's just gone up, which is typical of a lot of buildings that have gone up recently. And it's built with these incredible bricks. They're part from back to Roman times. So there's very, very fine bricks, and you go up close to this building, it's quite nice. Right, this is what we get a lot of nowadays. Dare I say, cheap materials, easy to build, quick to put up, quick profit, and then whoever's got them has to maintain them and work out whether or not they are sustainable, which often they are not. This is sort of powder coated panels. They do not require a couple of age. Obviously, if they're white, it's going to work quickly, and they require a lot of maintenance. They're very flat, these panels. Again, flat panels here, with glass. Here's more glass. I don't really think, although they've got some subdivisions in there, when you look from far, you don't feel that this space has been broken up again. None of them will be built right next to some walls. UPVC, luckily, UPVC is slowly being phased out. But again, cheap material, that doesn't stand the test of time because it tracks dirt incredibly easily. Cement will end up painted white, cheap as chips, but then it looks like this. This is actually a terrible photograph, but this is just art. It's quite nice if you're sitting out here, but it's really stayed after a short amount of time. This, for people who've done the course, will know about cement pointing, and it is very damaging to brick. Okay, let me zoom through. Again, breaking down bulk, as you can see, windows, subdivisions, and some kind of decoration break up a very flat surface here. Tendency towards flat surfaces, very little window reveals, very little subdivision, not much hierarchy, and flatness predominate. Right here, people were asked where they prefer to work, and these two buildings, one 77% to 23%, whatever reason, but you can basically see that they're two different typologies of building. Sense of enclosure and privacy. This is just one slide. I'm not comparing anything here, just because I thought there would be time. But I think it's very important that buildings, as we said, are set back and have some kind of distance from the street, especially if streets are busy. Lots of buildings now look right onto the street, very sheer. And you come out and you've got the cars buzzing by. Not all of them, but it is sort of quite a characteristic. Green is good. You can never get enough green. Whatever you are developing. So these are some buildings that are from a book, which I think are some buildings that have gone up in London recently that I think are successful. This is one that breaks down a lot of bulk. It's sort of got a vertical emphasis. In fact, this architect is inspired by Georgian architecture. This is another building which sits quite nicely in the facade, which is low rise. And the only thing is that the lack of space in here at ground level is quite difficult to walk past for the person next to it. This is quite fun. This is a building on a very geometric space, which is an enlivened panel. It's sort of triumphal walk, and this is a little bit so it's also sort of space specific. It also gives some nice light and dark on the surfaces as the sun goes through the day. This little wall was built to cover very flat, cheap brick wall, and it's proved very popular. This is an interesting one, ceramic. So glazed again, clay, which I think works quite nicely. If we go into the modern idiom, I don't know, a lot of you might know about this, but this was also built very recently. And it ticks a lot of build boxes, except the fact that this is not contemporary architecture. So I think we need to find some kind of way of breaking down bulk, but using 21st century vocabulary. Here's some other things that I personally think are quite good. I've talked about this before, breaking down bulk vertically and horizontally, different shaped windows. This one here is quite interesting. This started off life as 4 boxes and ended life as a shingles clad, I think this is timber clad and tile clad building, and these are now sitting there quite comfortably and just requiring a nice pattern, and they're all right. And this is some more timber cladding, which gives a certain warmth to the environment, although it doesn't necessarily stand the test of time. More buildings. This is a new vocabulary coming up in London at the moment, which luckily is brick. I think there's a lot going for it. Brick, big windows, deep reveals. It's looking pretty good, but it's still quite geometric, harsh, and it to my mind needs softening. This is just a little bit of research that has been carried out, and I will continue to work with the person who's carried out this research. Professor Arnold Wilkins, he is a Professor Emeritus at Essex University, works with visual discomfort, and they have worked out that when people look at nature, it's very comforting and it's really relaxing because our brains have been taught and over the millennia to deal with nature, and the further you get from nature, the more difficult this is. So these ones, images on the left, are easier to look at than the images on the right. And once you get to stripes, it's very difficult to look at them. And this is because nature's spatial invariant, which means that the deeper you look at it, from a forest to a tree to a leaf to a ladybird, you've always got something for your eye to relate to, where a lot of the flat surfaces and the stripes you don't, and that's why you're not right. And this is being measured by the amount of oxygen production in the brain. It's not just, you know, what people think. So we're going to carry on doing research on flat and reflective surfaces to see whether there really is a reason that quite a lot of people feel quite depressed by some of the modern architecture. And the more recent architecture has caused the brain to produce more oxygen, which suggests that it's more stressed than it is in the sort of more old-fashioned, decorative, traditional houses. So that's it. This image, which has been beside the back of all of the others, is Roger Lanzetti. It's in Siena, and it's a sign of good government. And it's interesting because Prince Charles, who is an advocate of traditional architecture, and David Chipfield, he was an architect in the contemporary idiom, quite modernist, both use this image in separate occasions to demonstrate what good architecture is and how it relates to human beings. And this is both of their idea from very different mindsets as to what is good. And I will just say that I will continue to work with my ideas, which concur with a lot of others, obviously, trying to produce sustainable development as long as I can, with the restraints and limitations we have. So.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And do we have any questions? And if I could remind you to just introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Hilary and I'm on the course currently. Thank you for that. That was a veritable gallop through all the material. A question struck me early on though, when you pointed at that lovely Mr. Boris man and you said that he'd approved that site because the one on the left, according to the London plan, was no longer possible. Can you explain, what do you mean? Why is it no longer possible to build? What is the London plan?
I should be more specific. Basically, anything that is built has certain limitations. It has to be disability compliant, every floor has to have, every room has to have a WC next to it. There are certain parameters that you must fulfill in your construction. So, for example, all houses need to have access from the ground. So you cannot actually build a building that has a stoop, so that has access, from an upper ground floor, which immediately gives you sort of a safety from the street. So that's not possible to build. It's very difficult to build buildings that are vertical rather than horizontal because of the way that the proportion of the steps to surface area to floor area is very, very difficult. And in fact, there are groups of people now trying to get this changed. Basically, every building that is now built has to have access for a wheelchair, which is not wrong. It's just that it really changes the way that everything is built.
But there were practical reasons behind this London plan.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yes. For example, the London plan has increased room sizes and floor-to-ceiling heights, which is very, very welcome because, a lot of them before you see the very low floor-to-ceiling heights.
Yeah.
So I think it's 2.2 or 2.3 now, which is acceptable. But, you could work with that typology of building and make it slightly different, as indeed the last slides I showed you, there are some buildings that are in that idiom, but not quite like that, and it could be worked at, essentially.
Any more questions?
I'm Deborah Lazarus from Arab. Something else that you said even earlier, which tied with a question somebody asked me the other day. You said that you provided advice to architects and developers on work that would, quote, stand the test of time. Now, you could interpret that in all sorts of ways, but the question to me was, do people ever think about what might be eligible for listing in the future? And I'm sure lots of people think, wow, my building is going to be the best building ever and everybody will want to know about it. But do people ever think about what criteria for future listing might be when they're trying to produce a really top-class development?
From my experience, I haven't had anyone saying, I want my children to look at a building that I've built that's now listed. It hasn't happened. Doesn't mean it won't happen. I think everything's much more immediate nowadays. I don't think this is the sustainable, holistic, long-term mindset is not what you usually get. because people, for example, architects, they need to get their work approved. It needs to come out, that's where they get their next commissions from. So they are very challenged as well. But I haven't heard anyone saying they want to build something that is a building. But the materials that we use nowadays, and this happens all the time with developers, especially the higher the buildings get, the more expensive they are to build. The materials become cheaper, and these materials do not stand the test of time because they are not built to last. That's not what they're there. They're built to be light, to go up quickly, and to be repetitive. So that's a bit of an issue. We were discussing earlier concrete. Concrete is one of the few materials that has both qualities and can go both ways. Because it probably can stand the test of time if you get it right and you can acquire a patina. So that's the current material I think that people could potentially work with to achieve that.
Okay, well, I think we're out of time for questions, unfortunately. So thank you very much again. Okay, so our next speaker is Isabel Astley. Isabel's background is in archaeology